Let's talk non-physical, non-physical. Let's talk non-physical. Let's talk non-physical. Let us have some spirit talk. Some spirit talk. Let us have some spirit talk.
Regarding, but there is one thing that makes sense to me is that, let's suppose you were a powerful entity. It makes sense that if you can create other entities, it will expand your possibilities of knowing new things, because you're going to let these entities you created to play by themselves, to explore by themselves, and then you accumulate. It's kind of like, instead of having one computer running, I mean, you have your own computer and you run some programs on your computer, but they say, well, let me put it in the cloud and let me allow other computers to also run the same program, or other programs, actually, because in this case, you want to expand your knowledge, or the same program, but applied to different data. So by doing that, you expand, and that's actually that's what AI systems do too. They work in parallel with the with GPUs and etc., and then they process different information. It's not only one centralized unit. It's divided into subunits. Now I want to jump into, because I want to finish with the review. I want to jump into, there was a discussion around almost the 2-hour mark about free will. I don't know if you remember that. But anyway, I can read what it was said there. It says, I will still be able to talk about this agent has free will, but all of the constituents also have their own free will. My guess is that might be able to be made to work so that the question is, if I say, is it only the one big consciousness that has free will, and the other ones are puppets, or do all the little consciousness have free will? And he says the answer might be both. And the thing is that probably Donald Huffman doesn't see a problem with this, but I do see a problem. I mean, from my experiences, I see there is something homogeneous, that I don't feel that I have a conflict of different parts of my consciousness saying, I want this and I want that. And if somebody wins, that's the result in free will. I see that there's no competition. There is only one homogeneous decision in everything. And the thing is that he starts with these conscious agents. Have you read about that? That he talks about these conscious agents, that they are related to the neurons, and for example, a conscious agent can be a group of conscious agents. So you can have like different hierarchies of conscious agents. But the problem I see with that is that if you start from bottom up, like he tries to do, what if it's like doing an assumption, like the cells of my body, each of them have an opinion to what I'll do. But there can be conflicts, because let's say my left leg wants to do something and my right leg wants to do something else. Am I going to be able to walk? You see, I see a problem with that bottom-up approach. But for his model, it's essential that apparently that he needs a bottom-up approach, because he's trying to build up from the conscious agents to end up with a big conscious agent that is our individual self. But I see a problem with that, because he thinks that there can be an agreement of free will from the little entities to the big one. But I see that can arise conflicts. I mean, I also it's like all the time there has to be a total agreement, constant agreement all the time.
It's he says that there is just this one consciousness, and then objects have no causal power, and somehow everything is in agreement with all there is conscious observers, and then somehow they all have free will, and it's in agreement with the source, isn't it? With the one. I have a problem with free will. I don't even know what he means by free will. Is it libertarian free will, or is it the kind of free will that, you know, compatibilists come up with, where, you know, you really don't, you're not the author of your thoughts or anything or your circumstances, but you behaved according to the urges that you feel, and where those urges come from is a mystery, and you're not the author. I mean, if he means that kind of free will, I even have a problem with that kind of free will. I think in some sense, there is no free will. There is will, but it's not free. It's determined by prior causes. That's how I see it. And basically, consciousness, I intuitively think that consciousness is only a witness, and it tends to identify with the process, and it can sometimes mistake the process for having authored it. It can identify with it, but really it's just information. It's like consciousness exploring itself and adopting different forms. But as human beings, from the human perspective, I don't see where free will comes into it, especially not libertarian free will. We can talk about the kind of free will that people experience if they're like puppets who are happy with their strings. If you're a puppet and you're happy with your strings, then you can feel free. You know, it's like, oh, I'm quite happy to do this. I don't know where the urges are coming from, but it makes me happy. I feel free. I feel liberated. But I really do have a problem with the libertarian free will, where you practically are free to do anything you like. And
no, but it's not exactly
I
like
think
free to do anything you like, but have the freedom with the constraints that are there.
Yeah. In which case, there is no freedom.
I think we are disagreeing in this topic, but anyway, free will is a huge topic, and maybe we can do another video about free will itself. But in my case, I tell you, I do think I can talk about myself because I don't know how other minds are. I can presume, but I know how my mind works.
Right.
I see myself having libertarian free will. I don't see any restrictions of what I can choose from. And I do this test to other people, like, if you can choose between a 0 and a 1, are you forced to choose 1 or 0, or you can freely choose? Because choosing between a 0 and a 1 is kind of like the most basic choice, because you can choose without any particular reason. You can just choose between a 0 and 1 for no reason. Do you see yourself as having a restriction about that? Are you forced to? Do you feel that you're forced to choose a 0 or forced to choose a 1?
I see it as I see it as not feeling restricted. Obviously, there is. To me, I think if you're not paying attention to it, then there is a sense that free will is there. But I do think it's an illusion. It might feel like I'm free to choose something, and I'm only going by
But the thing with the people that assume there is an illusion, this is what I like them to answer. If you think that you don't have free will, that free will is an illusion, then if you're so sure about that, why don't you tell me the differences between how you choose and how an entity with real free will chooses? It would be a difference, right? If you think that you are not totally free, so then tell me how different with an entity that really has free will decide different from you. And these people avoid that question. They don't give an answer to that question.
I tell. Okay, I'm gonna.
Can you answer the question? Can you say, Okay, I'm limited.
I'm
I
going to
cannot
try.
do this, but a real free will entity would be able to do it. So can you give an example? For example,
Come
between the
from
0 and 1, I mean, so far you're saying that you don't think you have real free will. So how would an entity with free will choose different from you, and between a 0 and a 1?
Right now, as you're asking me that question, I have no idea what I'm going to pick. But then if something emerges in my mind, I might decide to go with it. I don't know what an entity with absolute free will looks like, but I know that as a human being, I'm not free to do certain things. For example, I don't feel free to speak gibberish for the rest of this podcast. I don't feel
Well,
free
but
to
that's a different
just
story because you choose to, I mean, stay in making a good video. But what you just said, for example, you said that, well, you're kind of like waiting for a 0 or a 1 to come up to you, right? But why don't you just willing do, I say, for example, I'll give you an example of how I choose between a 0 and 1. 0 and 1. I say, okay, I won, say, let's say I can deliberate. And deliberate 0 or 1. Okay, let's do 1. So I chose 1. No particular reason. I just decided to do 1. So now I'm going to choose again. Okay, I choose 0. So I don't wait for a 0 to come to my mind. I just, with my will, I decide to choose the 0.
But would you entertain the possibility that perhaps you picked 1 because of underlying reasons? Perhaps because we've been talking about
No, because the
Donald
only reason
Trump.
I chose 1 is because I wanted to choose 1. There's no other reason. In
And
my
can you,
case, but I can talk only about my case.
but can you be absolutely sure of that?
Yes.
Could you entertain the possibility that because we've been talking about, say, Hoffman's concept of the one consciousness, perhaps that somehow influenced your thinking, and without your full awareness of it,
But
you came up.
even suppose that in one attempt it influenced my let's suppose I chose 1 and 0, right, or 0 1. But anyway, I can choose different next time.
Right.
I mean, how would I imagine an entity that would choose with more freedom than me? I cannot. I don't see any difference between how I can choose between 0s and 1 and an entity with real free will. I don't see any difference at all.
Right.
I can decide fully free.
Right. How would you how Bet's experiments with when people become aware of making a decision, apparently the brain
That's
already.
another thing. That's going to take a long time. I don't want to keep doing
Right.
that on this video. I mean, that's another story. I mean, because
Yeah.
we can go forever with free
Yeah,
will.
don't get me wrong. I do think there's will, but I wouldn't be so sure about the freedom behind that will. I mean, if I'm in agreement with my urges, and sometimes I do experience conflicting urges. For example, I used to be a smoker, and I gave up years ago, but I had several attempts. I tried to quit smoking several times, and I couldn't do it. And it just makes me think I had to wait for the right state of mind, or had to stumble upon the right state of mind that enabled me to finally quit smoking. At some point, I felt really constricted.
Yeah, but that's not free will. I mean, when you bring an example of smoking, you have a condition. You have an external condition, but free will is not about conditions. That's why, I mean, every time the topic of free will, I say, stay with the 1s and 0s. You don't need to bring anything else. When you bring anything else, it's a condition that has nothing to do with free will. So I'm going to ask you again, can you freely choose between a 0 and 1? I mean, let's say make 4 choices. I mean, 0 and 1, 4 times. Can you do that?
Make 4 choices, yeah,
Yeah,
between
0 1, 4 times. Do it 4 times.
Yeah, I can make a choice right now.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go
0
ahead.
1 1 0 1. Yeah,
Well, you
equal to
did 5. Anyway,
yeah.
but doesn't matter.
But yeah,
Did
you
you
see,
feel
like,
forced? Did you feel forced to do it that way?
no, it just came. It just flowed. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It just
But
flowed freely.
even if it came to your mind, you could have stopped, right? And you could have go slowly. Go slowly. I mean, do it again only twice, but very slowly. You don't need
Oh,
to jump into it. Just think about it and choose 2 times between 0 and 1.
just using zeros and ones. Yeah.
Yeah, choose 2 times.
1, 1,
2
1,
times.
0.
Why? No, 2 times. I
Two-
said 1 and
two-
1 is enough.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah. So 1 and 1. Yeah.
Did you feel forced to? Do you think that it came to you that you couldn't have avoided that? Don't you
just,
feel like you could have chosen 0 and 1 or 1 and 0?
you see, it flowed freely. It felt like I made a choice.
So why do you
But
doubt that? Why do you doubt that?
because I don't know why I didn't choose otherwise. I don't know why I didn't say 0,
No, but
0.
you don't have to have
To
a
me, it's an
reason.
absolute mystery where it comes from.
You don't need to have a reason. It's just your choice. It's like like for example, I'm wearing something navy blue right now. It's not like a specific reason. I just decide, okay, I like this color.
You
It
just
doesn't
grabbed
need
it.
to be. It doesn't need to be a reason to choose between a 0 and 1. You just are. You are aware that you have 2 choices and you select one.
Right.
But a computer code cannot do that. Computer code cannot freely choose between a 0 and 1. Computer code has to follow some criteria. So it can do a random number between, for example, you can call a function that chooses randomly between a 0 and a 1, and then
Right.
the computer will choose using a random generator.
Right, but you would say there are still restrictions. There's only so many choices that human beings have. For example, you can't choose to say remain in your bedroom forever, because at some point you're going to feel the urge to, you're going to feel hungry. You're going to
Well,
feel
because
the urge
again,
to eat.
those bring conditions. You're bringing the condition of
But
health.
yeah,
So
that's
so
the
so
freedom.
so, but that's not free will. That's why I'm saying for free will, keep it simple. And a lot of people make that mistake that they always relate it to something else. And it's like when you relate it to something else, you're also talking about something else, because free will has nothing to do with a reason. It has to do with the free choice. So without
To
a reason,
feeling
because
free.
I choose a 0 because I feel like choosing a 0. No particular reason. I just know that I can choose a 0 and 1, so I select 0. But I'm aware that I could have selected 1.
The thing with me is, we're probably not going to agree with this, but the thing with me is, just because I feel free doesn't mean I'm free. If you see where I'm coming from, I
Yeah,
could
but
absolutely feel free.
if you want to entertain the idea that it wasn't a free choice, then you should be able to come up with a theory of why did you chose that wasn't free. But everybody that talks about that, they don't give you a theory why. Because, for example, you can assume that my brain likes ones better than zeros. So if my brain likes ones better than zeros, I probably would choose 1 all the time. But is that the case? Do you have a preference that 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1? Because a robot might do that. A robot might choose always 1 because it has the criteria that a higher number is better. So it will always choose 1 consistently. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1.
I do, yeah, I do think you can be influenced by things that happen to you, and I do think that, again, the brain can influence the mind, and the mind can influence the brain. People often say consciousness is an epiphenomenon, but I have a problem with that notion, actually, because if you say that it's an epiphenomenon, then you're practically saying that consciousness has no causal effect in the world. But the fact that you talk about consciousness that's consciousness already influencing your behavior. You know, if we're talking about consciousness as a mystery, a deep mystery, it's something that we feel we are it, and then it prompts us to speculate about consciousness. So in a way, consciousness is already having an influence. I don't know what's going on with the notion of free will there. Perhaps it's something similar. It's just the reason why I say this, that it might be an illusion, is because I've caught myself, perhaps I'm making associations with things that happened to me in the past, and then I think, oh, perhaps that's why I picked what I picked.
Yeah, but don't add a condition to it, because free will is not about conditions. Like, for example, because I like, I mean, to be outside when the weather is a certain temperature, that's a condition that I have. It's not because
you're conditioned to feel that way. Yeah.
Yeah, because some people, for example, like warmer weather more than cold weather, and other people are the opposite. So that's a condition that people have.
I think you're trying to salvage free will in terms of more along the lines of thinking rather than the conditions imposed by the nature of being human. Is that what you're
like
saying?
stay away from a condition. Because another thing, a common thing, I mean, some people like to drink tea that is super hot. Other people like it not that hot. They like it warm.
Yeah.
And usually you're going to be consistent, right? I mean, I don't like it too hot. I mean, that's my case. So
Yeah.
I always want to prefer it warm.
Dig deeper. Why don't you like it too hot?
Because it burns my mouth, or I feel uncomfortable. I don't like it.
Right.
There is a reason, a condition that I have that I don't like it.
Right. Would you, and obviously you can make, if I dared you to have a,
but if you want to I mean, study free will, but studying the case of drinking tea, you're not really studying free will. You're studying the condition. So that's not free will. It's like you're going to the side. You're getting sidetracked on the conversation of free will.
Okay, so let's say we have conditions and they've got nothing to do with free will or feeling free. You have the conditions, and then within those conditions, there's only so many options that you can choose from. So you're saying we have absolute free will in choosing what we're going to choose from those options. We're absolutely free to decide, and we don't have any outside influence whatsoever that will, that will cause us to choose what we're going to choose.
Yeah, and actually the conditions are the things that can allow somebody to predict an action of somebody. For example, you and me have the condition that we like to explore consciousness. So somebody might predict that if they have to, for example, predict if we're going to meet again or not to talk about consciousness. Somebody can guess that we are, because we are both interested in the topic. We already did it, so it's easy to guess. Yeah. Because it's a condition that we have.
Yeah.
But with pure free will, it's more difficult to guess, and that's why I bring the example of 0 and 1, because if you are going to try to predict if I'm going to talk to Mike again about consciousness, you're pretty sure I'm going to bet that we are going to meet again to talk about consciousness, and you're going to have a certainty of probably 100%. But if you want to guess if I'm going to choose a 0 and a 1, you get to 50% because you're not sure what am I going to choose.
I was going to say, see, this is where I would make associations. I would speculate that the reason why you picked, for this example, the reason why you brought up 0s and 1s is because maybe in your life, because you're into computers and because we've been talking about computers, you're prone to talking about the binary code, and that perhaps was the first thing that influenced you to and although it feels like you made an absolute choice and you were absolutely free to do so, perhaps there's some underlying causes there that.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because
urge.
I can change it to choose between A zeta B and F G H.
Right, and it's an absolute
choose between
mystery.
A zeta B and F C H. I mean,
Yeah, and where did that come from?
basically, it's two choices that are meaningless.
Right.
You can choose between a bar that is at 45 degrees. I mean, like a forward slash and a backslash.
But don't you have a sense, if someone
Yeah,
asks
that's
you a
another
question,
example. I can use forward slash and backslash. What reason would I choose a backslash or a forward slash? So you don't
right?
need a reason. You can just choose whatever, right?
But basically, from my perspective, if someone asks me a question and says, choose between these two options, I sense in myself, this is my experience, I sense in myself like I have to wait for something to come up, even if it, however briefly, and then pick. I do have a distinct sensation that I just don't pick. It's almost like I'm waiting for something to come up. I don't know. Maybe we're having two different experiences right now, but that's the sensation I get. I don't.
Yeah, but what if you see them? What if you see two ice creams of different flavors and you see
Right.
them?
I see two right now.
Well, you're gonna choose
I
one
see
of them,
chocolate.
right?
I see strawberry.
Okay, well, so you're gonna choose one of the two.
I'm
You're
going to
not gonna
choose
wait.
chocolate.
You're not gonna wait for the ice cream to choose for yourself, right?
Yeah. The trouble is, I chose ice cream straight away, and because it's things that we taste, I chose chocolate. Sorry, straight away, because chocolate is something that I prefer over the
Well,
strawberry.
that's a condition, but
Yeah, yeah.
you can also remove the condition and choose the ice cream that you like the least.
Yeah. Right. I could say, okay, I've got these two options. Obviously, it's not going to take this long, but I've got these two options. I like chocolate more, but I'm not going to pick the one that seems too obvious to me. I'm not going to pick the one that I favor. I'm going to pick strawberry.
Even when you said that you will wait for the 0 or 1 to come, that's a choice of yourself. You chose to choose in that way.
Right. But is there, in some sense, you can choose what you choose, but you can't. You can decide what you're going to choose. That you can choose what you choose, but you can't decide what you're going to choose. So I've got no idea.
Yeah, I can decide what I'm going to choose. Because I can decide I want to choose a 0.
Yeah, but basically, I've got no idea the thoughts I'm going to be having in the future. Like, say, 2 minutes from now, I've got no idea. It's an absolute mystery to me.
Well, in general, yeah, but what if you're practicing visualizations like I do? I can decide what I'm going to think in 1 minute. I can build myself a list of things I'm going to try. I'm going to say, okay, in the first 5 minutes, I'm going to visualize trains. The second 5 minutes, I'm going to visualize houses. The third
And
5 minutes, I'm
there's
going
no
to
particular
visualize
reason why.
trees.
Yeah, there's no particular reason why you decided to visualize those things.
There might be a reason, but the reason has nothing to do with free will. I can just decide what I want to do.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. It has nothing to do with free will, but I would say there's some kind of influence there. Or say, let's say, like
Yeah, but when you
earlier,
talk about influence, you're talking about conditions, and again, I say conditions are not free will.
right?
The people have that tendency of trying to bring a condition, but free will is not about condition. Because with conditions, we are going to agree. We are, for example, conditioned to talk about consciousness because we like the topic. We are already conditioned. I'm not going to deny that. I mean,
I will
whatever
agree.
you like or whatever I like, those are conditions that we have.
Yeah.
I like to watch soccer. I like to watch tennis. I don't know
Yeah,
what sports you like to watch, but you're going to have different conditions than me.
I'm going to have obviously different interests, different
Right.
likes and
Well,
dislikes.
the interests are conditions.
Yeah, and the thing is, there is such a thing as voluntary action and involuntary action, right? And I think the voluntary one is where a person feels more free, as you know, feels like they are actually making a decision, and that's exactly what they want. But the thing is, you have to be happy with that decision, right? Or you always have to be happy with that decision. So I think in some sense there's always a kind of urge there, something urging you to go there. And that's why I have a problem with absolute freedom.
Well, but an urge is a
You can
condition.
feel free. It's like I was saying before. It could still be like puppets, but as long as we're happy with the strings, then we feel free. I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not saying.
What I think that when you see this puppet thing, I think you're talking about a condition.
It could be the condition of being human.
Well, let's talk. What sport do you like, for example, to watch?
I usually watch the World Cup, football, or
football.
In America it would be soccer. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I use soccer here because they use, yeah. Okay, so do you think that somebody might control you and before the World Cup decide that you would not watch it?
I wouldn't say something is controlling me. I would use the word influence really, because I don't feel controlled in that moment.
So it's not like a puppet, but it's like there are suggestions.
I feel less conflicted. I feel less conflicted. It's almost like everything about me is in agreement with the choice to watch football, whereas I might be more conflicted if I'm a smoker, as I used to be, and then I really want to quit smoking because I see the cons, but then I also see the pros of smoking because it might make me feel more relaxed and I have a craving. And yes, I know I'm talking about conditions there, but you see, because of those conditions, I don't feel free in that moment, in that instance. And then there's conflicting urges in my head. It's like a war in my head. That's how it feels to me. It's like a war in my head where some, a side of it is urging me to quit smoking because of several reasons, and then there's another side saying no, need to have it right now. It seeks relief. So in that sense, it feels like I'm being pulled from pillar to post, and where's the freedom in that? I really don't see it. But there's definitely will. Don't get me wrong.
Well, but you can also see it that you have you can also see it in a different way. You can see that you have two conditions. One condition that points in one direction, and another condition. Because, for example, I like, for example, I like pizza. But I also like a steak, let's say. So one day I might feel like I'm conditioned by both. On one side I want to eat pizza, and on one side I want to eat a steak. So there's no problem with having more than one condition. So when you're talking about to smoke or not to smoke, you might have those two conditions there.
But can you you see, as obviously it feels like we're living in a space-time reality, and time goes on, and you can, at one point you can be presented with two choices, what you're going to have, what you're going to eat, and in that moment you can feel like you're going to have the steak, right? But before that time, can you predict that you are going to feel like that and that you're going to have the steak? Can you actually imagine if someone told you that that's the decision, based on how you're going to feel, that's the decision you're going to make, you're going to go for the steak? Can you decide to feel otherwise prior to the event? Say someone from the future said that's what you're going to pick. They communicate with you in the present, someone from the future, and they say you're going to pick the steak. You're going to feel like you're going to pick the steak, and they bet money on it, right? And that could already be an influence. You might say, well, even if I feel like having a steak, I'm definitely not going to pick the steak because I want to win the money and I want to pick the other option. You see what I'm saying?
But that is not. I know some people brought examples like that, but that's not a free will. That is something that you're asking for more to free will than free will really is. It is like betting, what am I gonna do 2 weeks from now? Yeah, there are gonna be things that I'm gonna be doing that I cannot guess today. What am I gonna be doing in 2 weeks? But that's kind of like adding expectations to free will to make it harder for free will to be accepted as free will.
Yeah. So I think, you know, I really do have a problem with libertarian free will, but I do think there is, in some sense, we can will things, but I'm just dubious about where that's coming from. If it's really us that author it, or if it's someone else, and perhaps it's in part to do with Libet's theory experiment. And I know we're not going to talk about that because otherwise it would go on for too long. But I do wonder where you know, if we're really authoring anything, and perhaps on some sense, you know, if we're going to take Hoffman's theory on board, and there is really some kind of like substrate of consciousness, and we are part of that, you know, that's the one, then perhaps in some sense that one creates all possibilities. You know, like it could create the, you know, the wave function from the Big Bang up until now. It could be one decision. You know, the one could make that one decision. But you know what I was going to say to you? I find consciousness a deeper mystery than say the question, why is there something rather than nothing? And I know we touched upon this, like, you know, if there is a creator, obviously he decided to create this reality for some reason, right? It could be the case, but it could also be the case.
Creating a reality doesn't mean creating us. They might be two different things.
Sure. They might be two different things. What I'm saying is, it could be just consciousness, right? And the reason why there is something rather than nothing is because consciousness itself can't help but explore all types of qualia, right? And if we talk in terms of, you know, and language is a funny thing, if we start saying it can't help but explore, then that almost implies that there's no freedom there. So it's like, I read this book, Why the World Exists. I think it's by Jim Holt. I don't know if you know him. I think is a science communicator. Basically, the gist of the book talks about quantum mechanics, and a state of nothingness is highly improbable, therefore something emerges. And basically the gist of the book is the following. In the beginning, there are no laws. Laws are restrictions. If there are no restrictions, then everything is permitted. So everything that can happen will happen. And then the laws, i.e. the restrictions, only come once things begin to unfold and interact. So if there are no restrictions, everything is permitted, and therefore you have a Big Bang or several Big Bangs, I don't know. But from that, all these wave functions are explored, and then we are the result. Apparently, according to the theory, we are the result, although Hoffman would say there's only conscious observers, and what manifests around us is decided by consciousness. I don't know what the truth is, but I don't know if there are levels to how we can perceive things. It could be the case that on some level we feel like we have free will, and it could be true that everything is predetermined from one mind. I don't know. Or it could also be the case that we are also capable of experiencing the opposite. Does that make sense? There could be apparent paradoxes, but consciousness could actually explore both the feeling that there is free will and the feeling that there is no free will.
Yeah, but then like I repeat what I said before, for the people that, not for me, because I think at least myself, I have real free will. But for people that entertain the idea that their free will is an illusion, why can't you explore the differences between how you choose and how even if it's hypothetically, how an entity with free will would choose different from you.
I
Because
see what you're saying.
you should be able to notice a difference between the way you choose and the way, even if it's hypothetical, how that entity with free will would choose different from you.
Yeah, and the thing is, if I can't imagine what a free will, a truly free will agent, from my perspective, if I'm thinking, oh, free will must be an illusion, we have no free will, there's only will, but it's determined by urges, right? And if I can't, and if in my theory, if I can't imagine a truly free agent, an agent with free will, then how can I possibly say that we don't have free will? It almost brings to mind, say an atheist, for example, if he says, I don't believe in God because I don't see any evidence for God, right? There's an absence of evidence, although if they're going to be honest with themselves, they will say, I'm not saying God doesn't exist, but I see no reason to believe in one.
Right.
Until someone demonstrates that such is the case. So there's an absence of evidence.
Right.
And then someone might say, well, what would it take to convince you that a God exists? And then I might think to myself, well, I don't really know, because even if the stars in the sky moved to spell out the name of God, say, like it could be Yahweh or something like that, right? It still wouldn't be enough for me, because I would be thinking about other possibilities. I'd be like, well, there's also a chance, however far-fetched it might seem to my limited human mind, there's always a chance that there's some really advanced alien race out there pranking mankind, and they're so advanced that they can warp space and time. They know all there is to know about the universe, or far more than what we know, and they could be pranking human beings and making human beings believe that there's actually a God moving the stars when it's actually just aliens, you see. And based on that, because there's always that possibility, I'd have a hard time jumping to the conclusion that, oh, God must be doing that. So it could be to me, it could be a bit like that with the case of free will. I can't imagine evidence for God. What evidence would be enough to compel me? And at the same time, I really can't imagine what a free will agent would look like. And if we are already free agents, I mean, if in some sense free will is a reality, then we're basically moving around in this space. There's only so much wiggle room, but we can still make decisions based on what we have available, what's presenting before us right now. But yeah, I couldn't tell you where, if I make a decision, I couldn't tell you where that comes from. To me, it's a mystery. It could actually come from me, or
Well, but
something.
even if you think you don't know where it comes from, after it came, can you change it?
After it came, I can't change it. I could come to regret.
If you can change it after it came, that means you have total free will.
Yeah.
Let's suppose you meditate, right, and you wait for a 0 and 1 come. I close my eyes.
Yeah.
And I wait for a 0 1. Oh no, now I got a 1. But even after I got a 1, it doesn't matter that it came to me. I can still choose a 0. And why? Because I have free will.
Yeah. From your perspective, you feel.
But I mean, I cannot see anything more free than the way I decide. I saw a 1. I just saw a 1. But I can also choose a 0.
But you do
So
have moments.
there's no difference between the way I choose, even if it comes in a certain way, with the way an entity with free will would choose. It's the same way.
Right. But you would still say you make a decision and that has dire consequences, and then you would look back and think, I wish I had chosen differently. You can
also go back and forward, 0 1 0 1. You can go spend 1 hour doing that. Can you think of something with more freedom than that? For example, a computer program cannot do that. A computer program is forced to choose a 0 or a 1 or a random generator. And it's also, and unless you put in the code a random amount of time to choose, it cannot choose the amount of time it's going to wait. Let's suppose you want to, I give you the freedom of choose 4 zeros and four times between a zeros and 1 in a matter of 24 hours. So
Right.
I can choose in the morning. I can make 2 choices in the morning, one choice at 4 p.m., another choice at 11 p.m. But how can a robot come up with that?
I was going to say,
or a computer program. It has to be forced to, for example, use a random generator to come up with 4 different times. So it would choose one time randomly from the 24 hours. So one time is going to come. It won't be able to make a distinction of, no, I want 2 in the morning.
Yeah, I
want the 4 of them in the morning.
Yeah, I actually used to work as a bookie, and basically I used to get punters, and they would obviously go on the machines, and the machines are based on random number generators. And what whenever they used to play roulette, they used to think, I can crack the code. There's a pattern here that I can crack, but they would more often than not lose. Yeah, they would lose quite a lot. And basically the string of numbers they came up, because they would think, oh yeah, it must be randomly generated. So they would start to write a string of numbers based on their idea of randomness, but their idea of randomness was completely different to the machine's randomness. And I know we use the word randomness, but it's not really random, because the machine is trying to break up patterns, right? Certain patterns of numbers. And in doing so, it might end up producing what people might think of as patterns. For example, you might see a string of the same numbers come up, and then it changes. Like the same number could come up, like say 5 times, and then it changes. And then a normal person would probably not pick the same number 5 times in a row. You know, like a gambler would probably think, right, this number has been coming up, it's 3 times in a row now. There's no way it's going to be that number. Therefore, I'm not going to pick that number. I'm going to pick another number. And then the same number comes up again. So there's definitely a discrepancy between the randomness of a machine, you know, the numbers, that the string of numbers that a random net generator produces, and the idea of randomness by a human being. And it just doesn't match. And hence the reason why bookmakers make a profit from it. But other than that, I couldn't tell you, based on that, I couldn't tell you whether, you know, free will is the cause of the discrepancy between what the machine produces and what the person produces. But in action, in the context, and again, this is going to be like the conditions, in the context of a betting shop, they are making decisions based on what's coming up on the screen. So the screen, in some sense, is already influencing their decisions, because they're looking at the numbers that are coming up, and they think, right, there's no way that the same one's going to come up, so I'm going to pick a different number. So already the experience they receive is already influencing their decisions as they're desperate to win. But then if you remove the betting shop context, obviously, and it's quiet, and there's that, you know, like in this room right now, it's absolutely quiet, and you could ask me to make a choice between several choices, and I would make one based on something that flares up in my mind. But you know, and I would be absolutely happy. I would see no objections to making that choice. So you know, I would feel free to make that choice. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. What do you make of this?
Well, anyway, we talked so much about free will.
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. It could be true. I just
anyway, I want to keep going. I'm almost done with the
the free will topic.
no, I mean the review, because we were close to the end. And let's see.